In today's video, I'm going to be explaining as well as I can why it's not possible to be vegan for anything other than the animals. Now, before we start, I just want to say that going vegan absolutely is a fantastic way of lowering your environmental footprint, and eating a whole foods plant-based diet and cutting out processed food and animal fats is fantastic for your health if done right. And indeed, you'll have a better chance of avoiding our most common diseases, such as diabetes, cancer, and heart disease early on in life. I also don't want vegans to strawman me here by saying that I'm insinuating vegans don't or shouldn't care about either health or the environment. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that if you do, these are side issues unrelated to veganism that you just so happen to care about as well. And after all, there are junk food vegans and there are vegans who actively harm the environment every day. Some to an even greater extent than non-vegans. Perhaps that's a video for another time. Anyway, the purpose of this video is to show you why it's not even logically possible to be vegan for anything other than animal rights, regardless of whether veganism, if done in a certain way, benefits the environment or your health. So now I'm going to explain why. I'm just going to read you the definition of veganism from the Vegan Society's website, with a very relevant bit underlined. So according to the Vegan Society definition, veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms, note that key bit underlined, of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, and by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of animals, humans, and the environment. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals. Now wait a minute, I hear you say. That statement does include something to do with benefiting humans. So I assume by referring to humans it was talking about our health, for example, in that little bit. And it includes the bit about the environment, right? So what's the deal here? Well, here's the thing. While it's absolutely not possible to be vegan while abusing animals, it actually is possible to abuse animals, and thus violate one's own veganism, in ways that harm neither your health nor the environment. In fact, there's actually a whole list of non-vegan things you can do that actually benefit the environment. For example, if you went round your neighbourhood killing every cat you saw, this would actually benefit the environment, due to all the harm domesticated cats cause to wildlife. So if we promote the idea that there's such a thing as vegan for the environment, some neighbourhood cat killer who eats a plant-based diet could acceptably self-identify as vegan. Clearly this would be absurd. The same could be said of hunting wild animals who are wreaking havoc on local ecosystems. Again, what is it that's stopping someone who's vegan for the environment from going out and shooting deer or wild hogs who are causing damage? And indeed this does actually happen. Take George Monbiot, for example, the writer and environmental activist who identifies as a vegan, obviously for environmental reasons, who shot and ate a deer on a TV show recently broadcast on UK television. By the logic of someone who's vegan for the environment, i.e. animal rights are not a part of their reason for being vegan, this is excusable. So this guy has done the most non-vegan thing ever and actually gone out and shot an animal and ate their corpse and has justified it under the label of veganism because environment though. It's just crazy. My fellow actual vegans who are saying that you can be vegan for environmental and health reasons are just giving leeway to these people to take a fucking wrecking ball to veganism and just murder and exploit animals so long as it doesn't impact their health or the environment. Regarding the health part, so when people are saying that you can be vegan for your health, this completely ignores that veganism extends way beyond food. Food is just one part of veganism. Seeing as there are umpteen million ways to exploit and harm animals outside of food, how on earth can it be possible to say you are vegan for your health? Do you mean plant-based for your health? Because that is a thing, but vegan for your health, no. For example, what's stopping someone who's vegan for their health from going on an elephant ride in Thailand or buying animal-tested cosmetics? What's stopping them from visiting a circus with enslaved animals performing at it, or visiting a zoo, aka an animal prison? Again, these things have literally zero impact on your health. So anyone who's vegan for their health and completely leaves animals out of the equation has license to do these things. Now, whenever I make this argument to these vegan for my health people, they usually respond by saying something like, well, I don't do any of those things. But here's the thing. The reason they're not doing any of those things is just because they, for whatever reason, just so happen to not be doing them. It's not because they're ethically opposed to doing them. The only reason, for example, that they're not going on an elephant ride in Thailand is because they don't fucking live in Thailand. The only reason they're not going to an animal circus is just because they find it boring or maybe a waste of money. They're not boycotting these things for ethical reasons, because if they were, as well as consuming a plant-based diet and wearing vegan clothing, then they would be identifying as vegan for the animals. And that's the thing. If a so-called vegan is saying something like, "Oh, I'm vegan for the health reasons," it's actually way more sinister than you actually think. It's not merely that they just prioritize their health. What it actually means is that they genuinely don't give a fuck about animal rights. Welfare, maybe, but animal rights, no. Because if they did, then they would actually, just say it and just say, "I'm vegan for the animals." And I'm also tired of vegans saying that it's not fair for us to hold this stance because, "Oh, when I went vegan, it was the health and environmental reasons that inspired me." Okay, great. So you were inspired to go plant-based for your health or the environment. Fantastic. But when the switch flips and you actually go on to abstain from all forms of animal exploitation, far outside food, that's when you go vegan. People have to stop incorrectly identifying the date that they went vegan for the date that they merely started consuming a plant-based diet just because they watched, Cowspiracy or Forks Over Knives and thought, "Oh, I can lower my methane emissions this way," or "Oh, I can lower my risk of heart disease." It's only when the animal rights reasons come into play that you actually apply the true principles of veganism and avoid all forms of animal exploitation as far as is practically possible. I'm sick of people bringing their personal journeys into it and trying to discredit what veganism actually is and what it's truly about. I don't care if it was the health message that first inspired you to look into veganism. What inspires you to look into something isn't actually the same as when you become that very thing. If I'm a professional basketball player and was inspired to play basketball after playing netball at school, that doesn't mean I was a professional basketball player when I was playing netball at school, and it doesn't give people who play netball at school the right to say that they're a professional basketball player, or mean that netball has anything to do with basketball. What led you into something or inspired you to research further into the topic has naffle to do with whether or not that's actually part of the topic. Now, there's also this kind of fear I notice some vegans have that by excluding health and environment from the message of what it means to be vegan, that means that people are less likely to go vegan. For starters, as I've explained, there are millions of ways to exploit and murder animals that harm neither your health nor the environment, so it makes no sense to say less likely to go vegan if their only concern is health or the environment anyway. Essentially, that person's just going to end up abusing animals while identifying as a vegan, so long as it impacts neither. But I'd like to play this clip to you from Paul Bashir's latest outreach workshop, which gives a fascinating perspective of why we should dismiss these fears anyway.
Here's the thing, there's a myth being perpetuated in this movement that people don't care about animals, so that's why we talk about the environment and the health, right? Have you fallen into this thinking? Anybody? I have. Yeah. This is, again, a huge myth that's been perpetuated in our movement. If someone doesn't care about animals seemingly, it's usually because you're not effectively advocating for the animals. That's it. It's because you're not speaking boldly enough about the animals and you're not holding them to account enough for what they're doing to the animals. If you do all of that and they don't have anything inside them that cares about animal abuse and it being done in their name, then talking about the environment and the health is never going to get them to take animal abuse seriously. I promise you that. In fact, to the contrary, people who you focus on environment and health with who then take that serious and become environmentalist vegans, or I'm vegan for health, whatever the fuck that means, those people are harder to talk to about veganism because they think they're already doing it, right? And you say, but you wear leather and I just saw you eat some cream in your coffee. Yeah, but I only do it once a week and blah, blah, blah. But what about animal abuse? You said you're vegan, so don't you take animal abuse seriously? That's a bit extreme. I don't need to hear all that. That's a bit too much. I already do my part. But if they got the message from the beginning that there is no alternative to this, you are either an animal abuser or you're not, then maybe they would have gone in the right direction. I don't want anybody ever talking to me about why health is a better way to advocate, because I did it for 2 years straight. Guess how many people to this day are 100% plant-based because of my actions? Anybody? Guess. Yeah, exactly 0. Not even one that I can credit. For 2 years, and I was active as fuck. I was online. I ran a blog, which is still up on Tumblr. It's called The Health Cosmos, if you want to go check it out. Recipes. I had recipes for days. I was consulting with people. I ran a Twitter account with 700 plus followers. I was really doing my thing for 2 years. Not a single person. No matter how much science I talked about, no matter how much disease I talked about, people don't care about their health. I don't know why we think people care about their health. How many people here eat a 100% whole foods diet? Raise your hand. Not a single person. How many people eat lots of vegan junk food? Raise your hand. Half the room. Okay, why do we expect non-vegans are going to give a shit about their health then? Right? This is not a health message.
What's more is that when true vegans, i.e. the animal rights vegans, say that you can be vegan for your health or the environment, they're actually trivializing the very justice movement they're a part of. No other justice movement would try to advocate their message based on the benefits to the oppressor. So why the fuck do we sell animals short that way? I really want to show you this clip now of Joey Carbstrong from a recent exchange that he had with a non-vegan that I feel is outreach gold. So this clip for me is the absolute gold standard for the way we should be advocating veganism. And what Joey does here is truly highlight the complete absurdity of making veganism about anything other than the animals. Watch this.
I think when I think about the agriculture industry, I don't necessarily think about this side of it. I'm also thinking about the environmental impact it has.
This has got nothing to do with the environment and everything to do with the animals' rights being taken away from them and their bodies being exploited.
Okay.
That's what veganism is. It's to do with animal rights.
Okay. All right. I always look at it from an environmentalist perspective.
Why? You don't care about them?
Well, I do care about them being abused, but
What if I was to say to you, you know, the slave ships that took all the people from one country to another to be enslaved? What if I said that those slave ships would cause some environmental impact? What would that be like? What did you think of me?
Oh, terrible.
You think I was a terrible person?
I think when you talk about humans...
You'd think I was a terrible person if I thought that concentration camps caused an environmental impact, that's why we should shut them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, should I think you're a terrible person? We're talking about the environment when animals are being raped and killed?
I don't think it takes a terrible person to fuel it. I think the times are changing. That you are seeing a shift in the agricultural industry.
Why is it changing? People are waking up to this shit, eh?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is half of it, and the other half is what I've been speaking about, the environmental side of everything. Yeah.
Well, for these animals, this is the brunt of it.
Yes.
I'm an animal person. I'm speaking from the animal's position.
Yep.
And if you're in that position, I'd be fighting for you too, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And what if someone said, well, let's say you're suffering in this slaughterhouse, put yourself in their position, it's a hypothetical, and someone were to say, oh, we should stop this because the environment, though. You're there like, what?
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
So this was absolutely top draw Joey, because not only has he put the bystander in the animal's position and potentially made him see why his behaviour towards animals is unethical, but he's also injected a shot of animal rights vaccine right into the vein of this movement, which is slowly being torn apart by people self-identifying as vegan when actually they put animals right to the bottom of the pile, which again would be deemed as not only unethical, but as genuinely psychotic if we were to apply it to any other justice issue. And going back to Paul Bashir, he made a great point to me when I had a conversation with him the other week about just how dangerous it is when genuine vegans are condemning us for not allowing the vegan label to be applied to people who are merely doing it for health or environmental reasons. What he said was that these vegan for my health people are the sorts of people who actually say to other people while calling themselves vegan, oh, I'm not one of those vegans. What you eat is your choice. You have your choice and I have mine. I respect your choice to eat animals, and so on. The so-called vegans who are saying that shit are making a fucking mockery of the animal rights movement. They're turning what we do into a joke and acting as the enemy from within. They're giving off the impression that whether you support injustice or not is just some kind of personal choice and that there isn't a victim here to consider. Now, I just want to end this video by saying, just because you can't be vegan for environment or health, that doesn't mean that these arguments with non-vegans about environment and health don't happen, and that we should be unprepared for when they do arise. That's why I'm still, for now at least, choosing to keep the health and environment sections on Carnism debunked. Simply because non-vegans routinely do bring up these myths against veganism, like how it's unhealthy or how it's bad for the environment, and I think they deserve an answer. However, regardless of the fact that I believe these arguments should still be addressed where they appear, so long as the focus is brought back to the animals, that is, I still maintain the position that it's not even possible to be vegan for anything other than animal rights. And I hope you think this video did a good job of explaining that. That's all for now. Please like and share this video, and please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge help when you do that because I really want to grow this channel. Thanks everyone.